writer! Have you taken your writing as far as you can on your own? Are you looking for a writing community to help you get it to that next level? Maybe a place where you can connect, get inspired, and make some real progress while writing, editing, and promoting your book. I'm super excited to announce my brand new Inner Circle, which is launching in July 2025. It delivers all the support that I normally reserve for my private one on one coaching clients, but it's in a small group format with other supportive writers to get you all the information you need to make your book the best it can be. It's just $199 a month, which is a fraction of the cost of my normal one on one coaching. Check out the details at susiebedori.com/inner circle. We're getting kickstarted early July, so grab your place now. Welcome to Show Don't Tell Writing with me, Susie Bedori, where I teach you the tried and true secrets to writing fiction, nonfiction that are going to wow your readers, broken down step by step. We're going to explore writing techniques. I'm going to show you a glimpse behind the scenes of successful writers' careers that you wouldn't have access to otherwise. And I'm also going to coach writers live on their pages so that you can learn and transform your own storytelling. Whether you're just starting out, you're drafting your first book, you're editing, or you're currently rewriting that book, or maybe even your 10th book, this show's going to help you unlock the writing skills that you didn't even know you needed, but you definitely do. I'm so looking forward to helping you get your amazing ideas from your mind onto your pages in an exciting way for both you and your readers so that you can achieve your wildest writing dreams. And you're going to also have some fun doing it. Let's dive in.
I am thrilled to welcome to the show today Daniel David Wallace. He is an award-winning writer and teacher, and he spent 4 years of his PhD researching new ways to help writers tell a great story, which I find absolutely fascinating. His stories, reviews, and essays have been published in great magazines like Tampa Review, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, Air Schooner, and others. And his writing has won him awards like the Tom Brown Scholarship and the Hodges Prizes. Daniel designed a way of teaching storytelling, the character-first approach, which we're going to talk about on this episode. This approach has resonated with so many people. More than 13,000 writers read his newsletter each week. And I have been so honored to be a guest twice this fall in his summits, which bring together all kinds of writers and teachers. He is such a leader in our field. Please welcome Daniel David Wallace. Welcome, Daniel. It is so great to be hosting you. I've been to your communities and now you get to speak with my community. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here.
You have created such a unique community for writers, the Character First Writing community and all of the summits that you have out there. How did that all come about?
That's a great question. The summits came about in part because some of my earlier attempts to make a community had not been very successful. And I had long been interested in trying to create a Facebook group or a forum, an ongoing forum. And many people are very successful at this, but I really struggled. And I'm just sharing the story in case anyone else is interested in trying to create community and they've tried some things and they thought, this doesn't feel exactly what
Absolutely.
I want to do.
I'm fascinated by this. So keep going, keep going.
I consider myself to be quite extroverted, people-focused person, but I find that when I'm running an ongoing community by myself, I find that to be very stressful. I feel like I have to be doing things all the time to get people to talk. And I think that there are some people I've seen who are really good at that. And also I think it soothes them. It makes them feel good. For me, it's harder. I'm not really sure why, but that was some of my early forays into community building.
So that hence the summits where there's lots of teachers and you get to speak to many audiences. Awesome.
What I also like about summits is that it's a very intense experience, which is my ideal situation. I can come in, I devote myself completely to it for a week or 2 weeks, and I feel like it makes a real impact to people. And then I can kind of vanish. And that, I think, really suits how I like my sense of, my creative brain. In the future, I'd love to try the ongoing community again, but I'm going to have help, and I'm going to have people helping me out too, so that I'm not
Yeah.
trying to meddle in the posts every single day.
I absolutely love that, Daniel, and I really resonate with it as well. I'm a project-based person, so I love doing those online courses or like a month, a week, whatever it is, and just really dive in deep. And then, because we forget that even, as we're working with hundreds of writers to help their creative process, it drains us creatively too. We have to kind of recharge. It's interesting that you just said that. I just launched my very first ongoing program this July. So, and I had resisted it for years and years and years because of that same thing. But I do have, a team helping, and I have all those things in place so that I can make sure that I'm not going to burn out doing this. But I'm really excited about it. But yes, I'm excited to hear when you do that as well. What greatest need that writers are missing? Like, what drew you to start to teach writing in the first place? I love the way that you do, by the way. We're going to talk about that too. But what was it that you saw was missing in writers' processes that you knew you could help with?
It's a great question. So I was really interested several years ago in the way that so many writers were writing stories that they considered to be, in a good way, conventional stories that made sense, that were telling a kind of familiar arc or triangle or act structure. And yet it was clear the readers didn't really understand them. At first, I was doing a lot of classes in MFA workshops, and I thought, this is just academia. Like we're too literary, we're too trying to allude to things, we're being too subtle. But then I would go on Reddit and I'd look at people sharing their stories for feedback. I would see the same thing. Like I'm reading a story, I understand what the words mean, I understand what the sentences and the paragraphs are saying, but I don't really get what the writer was trying to do with this. The way that I do when I read successful, famous novelists. I'm with the story, I experience it as real, I am able to enjoy it and understand it at the same time. And I would go to community groups in places like Philadelphia, where I was studying at the time, and people would hand in their stories and things would be happening, and they clearly meant those things to mean something. I often tell the story about this penguin. A penguin died in someone's story, and we all started debating why the penguin had died, and the person eventually stood up and tried to explain it to us. And I just thought, what is happening here? Everyone's working hard, everyone's serious, people are coming to these meetings in their free time, no one's getting paid to do this. And yet we don't really understand the story, and the writer doesn't know how to convey it to us. And so that was my first kind of interest in trying to solve that problem for people.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. So that you've got people who are compelled. I mean, writing a book is not easy, or writing a story of any level. It's not easy. And so there must be a reason behind it. The writer always has a reason behind it, what they're trying to say. It's not getting on the page, and that can be really frustrating. And that's something that you're trying to solve. So one of the things that I heard you and been to many of your seminars, and you talk a lot about character first and character first philosophy. Is that trying to solve that problem, that character first philosophy? How did that all come? What's that all about?
Well, I can give you the long answer. As we're on a podcast, maybe I can do the long answer.
Yeah, do it. We're here for it.
So the basic idea of character first, this is the short answer part, is that I came to come up with a solution, which is, for most writers working today, modern writers, it's helpful to think that the reader makes sense of the story by forming a connection to one, or maybe sometimes more than one, main character. And that's why I call it character first. I think we read character first. We read by reading the story and thinking, okay, something just happened. Is that good for my person or bad for them?
Yeah.
And if we can instantly know the answer to that question, and there's a bunch of techniques that all writers already do, but you can do it more deliberately. If we know the answer to that question instantly, then we tend to be happy as readers. We're like, okay, I get it. The bad thing is happening.
We're tracking whether or not they're reaching what they're trying to do. And we want to cheer with them when they succeed. We want to cry with them when they fail. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've found that when readers can't do this, even if it's something in their preferred genre, I've noticed this with sci-fi readers of a sci-fi novel, or romance readers even with romance, Then these are like aspiring texts. These are unfinished manuscripts. Someone's working on them. They're trying to work out, why am I getting all this strange feedback from different beta readers, from editors, and even the readers that you'd think would be most predisposed to, like, I don't know, want to learn about giant spaceships and lasers because they like sci-fi. When they can't connect to the main character, they still have the same reaction of just like, I don't quite get it. I don't quite understand what's happening. People often hear things like the pacing seems off. And it's like, I think that a lot of those problems, not everything, but many of those problems can come back to, we don't have that relationship to the main character.
Yeah. And it shows up in so many different ways. We might try to solve it by saying, oh, it's info dumping because we're talking about the spaceship and they don't care. But really, I love that you've really honed in on that. It's not in science fiction. Readers will actually tolerate a little bit of info dumping or a little bit of information if they care, right? And if
Absolutely.
they see how it connects to the character. So yeah, I love that you break that down. It really speaks to me and speaks to what I see as well with writers and what they need. So I love that you're teaching that. It's awesome. I also see you teaching about what readers want versus what they actually need, right? And I love that you're reader focused. So yeah, how does that work?
Well,
They don't think that's what they need, right? They don't think that's not what they're asking for.
No, there's no reason why the reader would be able to tell you this. And this is why I think many writers who have this kind of problem will go through many different sources of advice, because it seems like all kinds of things could fix it. Maybe the scene should be slower. Maybe it should be faster. Maybe it should start in a slightly different place. One of the things that helped me come up with this approach was reading the Victorian novelists who were really big, heavy narrators. And so what I saw with a writer like Anthony Trollope, this is back in PhD school, that Trollope would just begin a scene by saying, here's a character, here's what he's upset about, look how disgusting and disgraceful he is. And then he'd run the dialogue, and then he'd say, see, I told you. He
interprets that for you, right? So
does everything for you.
Yeah.
And apparently, I haven't read every Trollope novel, but apparently all but one of Trollope's many novels are all narrated by essentially the same voice, just telling you. There's no sort of depth. It's just, here's the meaning of everything. And what I found in the class, we all read it as a group, is that people enjoyed this. I have been told they wouldn't like it because it was telling.
Right.
Not sure. I would have been told that this was like a crime against literature. Hemingway would appear in the doorway and admonish us. But it turned out that people, just like back in the Victorian days, people enjoyed this. And at the very least, and maybe this is even more important, they didn't dispute what Trollope was saying. They basically accepted it. They'd say, well, he is disgraceful. I can't believe. They didn't try to read against the narrative. And I started to realize most stories are doing this, just in a much less obvious way. They're getting us to see how we're supposed to understand these events. And Trollope is just the most, I don't know what to call it, obvious, just like plain, here it is.
Artless. Oh my goodness. Yes. But you're right. And there's other ways to do that where the character, whatever point of view character you're in, I like to say that there is your interpreter, right? If you've got a narrator, then yes, it's like hitting somebody over the head with it. It's a little bit outdated style, but it can still work. But your point of view character is the interpreter. So we believe them, and they tell us how to feel about something, which is okay, right?
Yeah. There's a great book by Wayne Booth called The Rhetoric of Fiction. And he tries to track how the writers of the 20th century would take these lines that used to be delivered by the narrator, that would just be the omniscient narrator, like telling you. He said this and this and this. She was devastated. And then slowly over the 20th century, it would become like, she looked as though she were devastated. And it's like the same thing is happening, but it's getting focused on this main character because now it's unfashionable, it's unappealing to have this omniscient narrator anymore. And so that was kind of my sense of like, we're still reading. I mean, we're more sophisticated readers in some ways, but we're looking for the same kind of a thing, but it's just in some ways harder to do technically. And successful writers figure out how to do it. But I thought I could help a lot of people to figure out how they could do it in their own writing.
Hey, you're on the Show Don't Tell podcast. So, I mean, that's literally what we talk about almost every episode is some aspect of that, because there are so many ways to do that. conversations that I'm having in the industry has been really interesting, because you're saying we have more sophisticated readers. And yes, on one perspective, and then on another perspective, we're competing with so many other mediums where they can literally be in AI or be in virtual reality as a character. And so that immersive writing becomes really something, and I'm not saying it's good necessarily. So yes, on the one side we have more sophisticated writers. On the other side, we have to kind of play to this other aspect where people can digest story very easily in other formats these days. And so it's interesting to see how we have to evolve that technique and how that's going to play out to keep readers reading.
I totally agree. And I think something that I think all writers should consider is like, how do you draw the reader in on page one? And I think that there are some methods of plotting and structuring that maybe they've created the inventors of these methods themselves wouldn't agree with this. But sometimes the kind of folk wisdom of these ideas, the thing people are actually following, suggests that you can have a few pages before things get interesting. You can wait to page 5, and then there's going to be this inciting incident. And I think that is a mistake. I think that what I love is the book that begins on page 1, ideally line 1. And I think that often you see, not always, but you often see a connection to a character who is out of balance, off balance, out of whack, who's troubled by something, who's trying to get back to equilibrium. And I think that a skilled writer can do that very quickly without much exposition. And so I think that even in like the first sentence, I'm sort of going for this character first approach to sentence 1.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of sad in a way that we won't wait 5 pages, and I get that a lot. But Susie, it's on the page. It's in the chapter. Like, aren't they going to read on? And I mean, it depends on your goals, right? If you really want to have that book that's going to capture an agent's attention, a publisher's attention, a reader's attention, regardless of how you've published it, these days we can look at the sample, right? We can open up the ebook and check out that page 1, and we'll decide really quickly. We don't necessarily give you 3 chapters anymore. And that's where this comes in, right? You've really got to focus on how connecting with that character. And I love that you teach that, because it's true. And people argue with that all the time. It's a sad reality, right? They want people to want to work harder.
I sympathize with those people. I think that one of the great things about trying to study, and this is maybe back to community and audience building, one of the great things about studying sales and marketing in a really comprehensive, serious way, not as like an embarrassing thing one has to do, but as a thing that is important to do, is it helps you, I think, move past that kind of worry. Like, you just realize different people need to be reached in different ways.
Yeah.
And if you have a demand that everyone can be reached in a particular way, I think you're going to just go through life being very disappointed. And there are some people who are happy to be disappointed for a very long time. But I think that studying, like, how do the people who are really good at marketing talk about it? How do they make sense of it? And seeing those, like, well, how can I reach different people? And we all know that there's a ton of people who will not read to page 5 if they're getting nothing from pages 1 to 4. And it'd be lovely to wish, it'd be nice, it's great to wish for a different world. But I think it can be good to face the world you actually have and think, okay, I can reach my, 10, 20% of the writers or readers with my page 5 getting started story. But what about the other 80? How could I find a way to connect to them?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when you're getting advice from a writing coach or from a teacher, really that's what you're trying to convey is, how do you give yes, you're right. You might find that 1 in 10 reader that will read on. How do you give yourself the best chance? How do you eliminate all those other things? And I think as well, this is where genre expectation and readers kind of sort themselves into those with the types of books that they like to read. And so it's not about how do all readers like it, but if there's a particular expectation, if you're writing romance, give me the meet cute. Don't skip it, because otherwise, what are those expectations and what are those things? And readers kind of sort themselves. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think even when we're talking about 100%, 80%, 10%, that's not 100% of all readers out there. That's of a tiny portion that would be interested potentially in your book. If you're writing a book about, I don't know, a guy just walking around Seattle for the weekend in the rain, thinking about stuff. There's a certain kind of reader that loves that kind of book. And you probably need to figure out what are they looking for in the first 5 pages and make sure your 5 pages has something comparable to that. And I think as well that particularly, romance writing is such an interesting field. And I find it endlessly fascinating. And I think that if you're working in these kinds of genres, these kind of styles, like you have to give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Like there's only so much clever rearranging you want to do. And often what I think many writers struggle with is in order to write the book, you have to do a lot of writing that really has only a limited relationship with the final product.
Yeah.
And the kind of famous killing your darling stuff, or just the revising thing. Like you often have to create a whole bunch of backstory, context, character being a child. And it's hard to grasp that almost none of that, depending on the
go in your book.
Yeah, I mean, depends on the story,
Absolutely.
but in many cases, almost none of that needs to go into the final draft. And realizing just how extensive that trimming has to be can be difficult for people.
Yeah, and that's a great reminder for listeners because I do have a lot of, we've got seasoned writers on here, we've got new writers on here that listen to this podcast. And yeah, I like to call it brainstorming docs and remind them it doesn't go in your book. Like, don't count it as part of your word count. If you're doing like trying to hit the 50,000 or 100,000 or whatever your word count is, it doesn't count. But you, the writer, you need that information. So it's not like you can't skip it. Still have to do it. Just treat it as this other exercise and don't put it in the same document as your book, because then you'll feel like you're killing your darlings when you have to pull it back out. Don't ever put it in there in the first place is what I like to teach. But
yeah, I totally agree. I think as well, I want to speak very carefully here because there are some books that really thrive on a lot of backstory. The book I really like is Daisy Darker, where there's a parallel story of flashbacks and there's a present moment story. But I think in many books, writers underestimate how much the reader simply wants to know what happens next. You start a scene, you start a chapter, some things are happening. And I think that often in the writer's mind, this is just part of a massive epic of things they could write about, past, present, future. But in the reader's mind, there is a clock ticking. Like the story began on Tuesday at 9 a.m. Okay, now it's 9:05. What happens now? And I think that when the writer is sort of like on some level taking their eye off that clock and is giving you all kinds of other things that could be really interesting, but really aren't about what happens next, I just think you're in dangerous territory. And obviously, people have done amazing things with form and with timelines, but often you see what successful writers are doing is earning that extra stuff. I want to tell you about the character's childhood. Okay, we need to see some really exciting stuff for the next 20 pages.
And we only care, your reader is only going to care about that stuff that happened in the past. If it helps, like you said, the ticking timeline in story present, if it helps predict what's going to happen in story present, and it gives us information that helps us predict how the character might act because of the trauma that you're dumping on us or the whatever you're helping.
Exactly, yeah.
If you're helping us figure out what's going to happen, then cool. If you're just telling us something that's not related, that's how we can discern. But you're right. We don't want to just go into the past and see all of that unless it helps us figure out what's going to happen next. Right.
I have another theory.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I think that many people, when they read, we naturally tend to remember the middle and the sort of ending-ish of books. We tend to remember the second half better. There's more going on. There's more drama.
We care more, right?
Care more, exactly. We've got really invested. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I have had many conversations with writers where they'll say, well, I've got to start with this prologue-like material because that's what happens in this other famous book. And sometimes it's even something that what they're describing to me is something that doesn't happen in book one of the famous book. I'm like, we had to wait multiple books to get to that moment in that famous book you're describing. And you want to put it on page one?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a reason why.
And that book might be 20 years old that you're comparing writing styles with, right? So let's take a look at that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Often it's like people, we naturally think of a story and we think, well, halfway through the book, Jack Reacher was shooting all these people, or some other character, there was a huge space battle or something like that. And it's hard to remember that that's not actually what was happening on chapter 1, chapter 2.
Yeah.
And our memory is going to deceive us of like what was actually how the book actually began.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So talking about levels of writers that listen to the podcast, right? And so for your programs and the summits, what level of writer do you invite? What are the expectations in terms of who can come to the summits?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with summits in particular, the way a summit works on a functional level is that you can attend for free if you watch live. So if you attend the whole thing in the moment, you can watch it for free. If you want the luxury and the time to rewatch things, to take your time, to come back and watch another talk, a talk you like twice, then you can upgrade to a pay pass and get a whole bunch of other great stuff. But that's the system of summits that I did not invent. I just try and adopt and use. And in that situation, I try to make things really accessible for everybody, because I think that the premise of a summit is that there are people all over the world arriving, many people who can't afford a course or a developmental editor maybe, or definitely don't have the time to go and do an MFA. And there's this amazing promise of like, if you can stay up from morning to night for several days, you can get a really great writing education.
Yeah.
What I try and do in my events is very simple, but it's surprising how I think it makes a real difference, which is I just try and get my speakers to talk for a bit longer. And I find that as speakers talk for longer, they tend to deliver more and more detailed, in-depth, profound ideas. And I think that there's something in there for everyone, something in there for the more advanced writer. But the other great thing about doing a summit is that there are lots of different teachers. And so one talk that will, naturally go over a beginner's head a little bit. They understand that there's something interesting there maybe, but they won't be able to latch onto it in the way that they would like to, could really help the advanced writer. And sometimes it's hard as the host to kind of signal that to people, but hopefully the person who's going through the event, looking at talks, the advanced writer sees a lot that they can benefit from and enjoy.
Yeah. I love that you say that you let people talk longer, which is why I have this long format podcast, right? Because we want to get past that sort of shtick. Because all of us as writing teachers, we have sort of the basics, but we could geek out. I mean, I actually sit here all day and talk about writing. It would be no problem at all.
Yeah, I had my event is funny. I mean, my core audience, if someone talks for 20 minutes and stops, the audience thinks something's gone wrong with the Zoom link. Like they're like, hey, what's happened? Video just stopped. Where's the rest of it? I had one talk that went on for 2 hours over 2 different Zoom rooms. We had to move everybody out of the main Zoom room so the next session could begin. And they were delighted. I mean, as a scheduler and host, I was sitting there.
I was going to say, hey, that's great to know because I'm going to be speaking at one of your coming summits.
Well,
I'm like, maybe I'll no, I'm just joking. I won't make that happen, but
yeah. Yeah, I think that people really like that. People really like to just see someone have the space to explain something in a lot of detail. And
well, it gives space for questions as well, right? Like so that we can give detailed answers, because I think that's what, yes, I mean, you've got this, the way that you describe the summit, yes, it's free to come live. But the thing is for the speakers, having a live audience and getting that energy out of it and knowing what it is, like who's in the room and what is it that they're needing and what do they want? Like there's energy in that as well. And so, if everybody's going to watch the replay and nobody's there live, it isn't much fun for the speaker for sure.
One thing I really love about my events is that through the event, there is this core audience that tries to go to seemingly every talk, or at least a lot of them. And so there's the same names coming up. And I find that it's both people on the paid pass and people on the free one. It's just this group of people, they show up in the chat, they're talking, they're like, here we go.
They've like cleared their schedule. It's somehow it resonates with them at this moment. Like I'm dropping everything and I'm focusing on my writing for these days and that's it, right? Like I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like the shepherd, the rider of these events, not the owner. Like I feel like I stumbled onto something back in 2020 with the first one of these summits. And at times I feel inadequate to keep them, to be the person in charge of them. Whereas with my courses, I feel like, okay, this is my vision. I'm laying it out. If it doesn't make sense, I'll fix it. Like I really feel clear about what I'm doing. But with the summits, it is always this collaborative experience, collaborative with the audience, collaborative with the speakers, with the people who sort of come through the event. And
They're always different, right?
yeah, and so I feel very honored and blessed that there are so many people that keep coming to these events. Many people have been, this is year 6 of Escape the Plot Forest, and many people have come to every year. Many
That's a
people
huge testament. That's amazing.
buy their ticket for Escape the Plot Forest a year in advance because I do a sale sometimes on Black Friday for the whole year of summits. And it's just a really magical experience, and one that in many ways, things like the code of conduct were created by attendees telling me, Daniel, you've got to write all this down. Like, you've got to make it clear to people what's expected of them. And that wasn't something that I came up with. It was that attendees were suggesting things to me. And I thought, that's a very good idea. I should do that.
I love that, because I think what's unique about your community that actually is shared in my community is the positivity, right? And the absolute acceptance of everyone and the positive vibe, because that isn't the case everywhere on the internet for writers. It's not always so welcoming. So what is it that you do that creates that? Is it the code of conduct?
I mean, one thing that I try to do, and if anyone else is considering trying to create their own community like this, I think it's a really important thing to consider, is that there's a few ways to put this, but like one way of looking at it is like, once the sessions begin, each individual audience member attendee is not really the focus of my focus of my attention. Like, I'm trying to make sure that the speaker can deliver their talk uninterrupted, with a positive chat, with comments that make them feel good, and questions that help them develop their ideas and make it clear. And there are so many ways that one person can derail a session, and you can be sitting there at your desk, as I'm sitting right now, and you can be watching the chat and you think, that's a bit of an odd thing to say, but I'll just ignore it. I'm sure that person won't say anything else. Or you see two attendees starting to have some kind of strange interaction about biology or something, and you just think, and it's very easy to just sit there and think, well, I won't say anything about it.
I can see where this is going.
The experience is, you've got to just intervene very quickly and say a bunch of things, like, even, this is going to sound maybe weird, but even like the person who's like a performative non-understander. I don't get this. I don't understand. I'm leaving.
Can you
I'm
repeat
going.
this? Yeah.
I don't understand this at all. I'm going to get out of the room. I'm leaving. 2 minutes later, I don't understand it. It's like, didn't you leave the room? Like, I thought, you're still here?
They'll leave the room. Maybe they didn't know how, right?
Yes.
Like, yes, you can leave the room. Go ahead.
And I think it's really valuable as a host to just fairly quickly, and as quickly as you can, to start trying to just clarify to people what is expected of them. And one thing that comes up all the time, and it comes up the most, maybe this is going to be unsurprising with female speakers, is that people are incredibly rude to the speaker, often about the way someone talks, the way someone looks. And often the person is right there in the room. The person is in the chat answering questions. They are going through the comments, responding to people. And you have to remind people, like, you wouldn't say that at an in-person reading, would you? You wouldn't turn to your friend and make some kind of comment that everyone could overhear. And trying to be really clear about that, deleting comments. I mean, very rarely actually removing someone from a room, but just clarifying to people what is expected and what's the vibe. And eventually, the good thing about doing an event that the stay is essentially the same sort of message, same branding. Talks change is that the core audience starts doing that themselves, and they will start saying, like, oh, that's a bit of an unnecessarily harsh comment, and we roll on. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I just think, and I've had a similar experience, although when I started my communities, I was terrified that it was going to be like a ton of work to moderate or to kick people out or to like manage all of that. And honestly, I find writers so welcome in general. I mean, there's always going to be something, and when you run events as large as yours and as often, there's going to be things, but in general, like, such an amazing community. If you just lead by example and you don't let it go down that path, it stays that way. Like you said, it starts to moderate itself. And I love opening up one of my communities, and somebody that I've worked with is answering the question exactly the way that I would have answered, because I've answered it for them, right? And this is the way that it works. One of the most surprising things to me when I first became a writer 15 years ago, I was terrified to go to communities. And at that time, they were in-person conferences when I was trying to first get my book represented and get my first books out there and all those things so many years ago. And I was really amazed at how welcoming writers were. I always thought, I mean, I was from the cutthroat world of business. I worked on Wall Street, all the things. I thought that they were going to be like, oh my gosh, you're new and you're this and you're that, and like not give me the time of day. And that wasn't my experience. People were really wonderful. And then, over the years, I've kind of realized that we are not competitors. And even, how you treat these summits, we are not competitors, because if I get somebody interested in writing, they can also learn from you. If they learn from me, they can learn from you. They can keep learning their entire writing career. Same thing with books. If another writer has created a reader for your genre or your type of book, guess what they want to do when they finish? They want another book that's kind of like that. And so, somebody else's success, if you think of it that way, is actually lifting up or creating more space for your book to be successful. And I think once you kind of like think about it that way, it's not that surprising that the writing community is actually pretty awesome if you let it be.
Yes. And I want to be absolutely clear to everyone that what I'm not describing is that these events are like a kind of Lord of the Flies situation. And I'm not there
No.
bashing people with my
No,
blocking.
I think it's rare, right?
It's very rare. And so what you're really doing is just clarifying to people what is expected. It's often a tiny number of people who are either knowingly or unknowingly causing issues. And you're just showing the vast majority of people who want this event to go well, who are welcoming, supportive of other people. You're just showing them like, this is how we try to do things.
Yeah.
And I would just say as well to anyone who's thinking of trying to make their own community in that sense, that in my experience, the moments of intervention, correction, whatever you want to call it, those really bond the community together. Like when you sort of say, hey, everyone, we have a set of rules, we have a way we like to do things here, and something happened, I'm not going to name who it was, and something happened earlier that I wasn't really happy with. That's where, like, in some ways, the event really gets started. That's like the core adventure, the act one turning point for the event, where people are like, okay, we're in it now. Wow, this person really cares about me. I thought I was just going to watch a bunch of videos. But
I love that you're putting on plot, like you're putting a plot to it. It's awesome. I mean, that's the way that we kind of consume it. How do you decide what topics you're going to do for your summits each year?
well, I am incredibly unoriginal. And so I
doubt that.
have the exact same summits every year. My very first one was back in October 2020. This is a bit of a writing teaching moment here, but I had been running my business of courses and classes for a few years, and I was just feeling really burnt out. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have time to keep marketing. I didn't have the money to pay for marketing. And so I was just kind of thinking, like, what am I doing here? That my email list never changes. I got some great customers, but it just feels like it's I'm working with great writers. And I went to a talk by Brian Harris, the marketing teacher, and he sort of said, like, spend a year getting in front of other people's audiences. And I thought I could just do that in a weekend with a summit. And then I thought, well, what's the summit that people would most want to care about? And I thought, for fiction writers, it's plot. So that was the first one. I have another one in the spring about process, and a third in the summer about marketing for early stage authors. So not marketing finished books, but how do you start thinking about building an audience, even if you feel like you're not ready for it? And, I really try to create at these events a kind of holistic writing education for people that takes people through a journey of general tips and guidance and the essentials with plot, things like structure, things like acts, hero's journey, and so on, and then works its way into specifics, like how do you structure a mystery novel? How do you think about this romantic subplot? And then what I've found as well is that as people get one of their needs met, say with plot advice, their mind inevitably turns to things like, well, how do I just get down and do the writing? And so I always have some talks about confidence, about process, and also some talks about getting published, because once people feel like they're like, okay, I got a great idea for what I can do for my story, their mind turns to, okay, well, what do you do with it next?
Absolutely.
And so I just try to create a great experience, but I'm also just always looking for people to speak at these events, looking for new teachers. And I also would want to give the teachers their time to shine. And I always want to make sure that they're talking about something that interests them, that's exciting to them, and that fits in the kind of things they usually teach.
I love that. Okay. So we're nearing the end of our talk together, but I want to ask you my traditional quick fire questions. Are you ready? Okay.
Yeah, ready.
What was your first big break where you were like, oh my gosh, I am going to be a writing teacher and this is the moment and I know it's true. It's going to happen?
I read an article when I was getting started. I had a blog. The blog was mildly successful, but I thought, started reading techniques. I'm going to relaunch it with a professional big thing and have a newsletter. And I'm going to have lead magnets. So you will consult to free writing courses and they'll join my email list. And I read this great article said, How I Made Pinterest My Full-Time Job. And I just read that, and I read that over and over again, just a 1,000-word blog post. And I just did that for 6 months, and I grew about 2,000 people on my email list very quickly. I was repinning stuff at the zoo. I was repinning stuff at home. I was contacting people with big group boards, stuff you can't do now. Pinterest has changed the algorithm. But at the time, it was really magical. And I had this feeling of like, people say that if you have an email list of 2,000 people, that's like $2,000 a month. The listener should not take that as gospel, but that's what people said. And I was thinking, I'm doing this. I haven't made $2,000 a month yet, but I'm doing it.
But people are interested in what you have to say. I love that. When I teach, and it's actually what I taught at your last summit, the 30 ways to promote your book, is just find something that you can do and show up and do it over and over again. And that's essentially what you did. You're like, all right, I can do this blog thing. I'm a writer. I can use my writing. I'm going to do it and show up and show up and show up. And that's what worked, right? I love that. It works for books. It works for all kinds of different things. What's your best advice for writers just starting out? Not all the advice, I know you could, but if you could just give new writers one thing, what would it be?
If you're writing fiction, one tip. Oh, this is so difficult.
I know, right?
I'm going to go with my instinct.
Okay.
I feel like I could say a few more things, but the first thought is really work on designing a good scene. I think that if you can design a good scene, you will be in a stronger place than if you're trying to come up with some really complicated multi-character, multi-timeline story. The character wants something. They try to get it. They are surprised in some way, for good or ill, and they try to react to this surprise and try to figure out something new. And I think just working on that for a while, for some period of time, I think is a really good starting point. Because from there, that same thing I just said can be the description of a whole novel. A person wants a thing, they try to get it, they are surprised, they come to a new reality. But I think that trying to work on that craft technique, that framework can be really powerful.
Yeah, I love that. And it's true. A lot of times, newer writers come wanting to emulate this really complex structure of a book. And the truth is, a lot of times they aren't ready to tackle that because it makes it way harder. It makes the writing like 10 times harder to do it. And the chance that they're going to do it not well is high. And the thing is, at the end of the day, that plot structure doesn't necessarily make for a stronger book unless you're writing something like a thriller or psychological thriller or suspense where you need that. For most books, it's not, but tackle it one at a time, right? Like the next book, next one. When you're bored of writing because you know it so well, then you can throw in those little things that make it really neat. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so you've got a summit coming up really soon. Escape the Plot Forest is happening October 18th to 24th, 2025. If you're listening to this later, then there's lots of other ones. So where can we find you? Your upcoming summits, whatever they might be, whenever people are listening, and your ongoing programs for writers.
If you're listening before October 18th, you can just Google it, Escape the Plot Forest or forest.plotsummit.com. It's going to be amazing. We've got some amazing speakers, including Susie. Thank you so much. It's going to be fantastic. It's 5 very in-depth days all about how to improve your writing. If you are listening to this podcast some other time of the year, then I have a free course for writers that I think is a great way to try some of these ideas out. It's called the Character First Story. You can find it. Sometimes if you type in characterfirststory.com, it will come up. You can also go to my website, danieldavidwallace.com, and you'll find it there. And I sort of teach some of these character first ideas in the framework of a short story, and it's all free. It's got 12 parts. It's got little handouts, and it's self-paced. So you can go through it in one long binge session, or you can take a couple of weeks to do it.
Amazing. And we'll drop all those links in the show notes. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being here today. And I will see you at the summit.
This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Susie.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Show Don't Tell Writing with me, Susie Vidori. Help me continue to bring you the straight goods for that book you're writing or planning to write. Please consider subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening. Also visit susievidori.com/newsletter to hop on my weekly inspired writing newsletter list, where you'll stay inspired and be the first to know about upcoming training, events, and writing courses that happen in my community. If you're feeling brave, check the show notes and send us a page of your writing that isn't quite where you want it to be yet for our Show Don't Tell page review episodes. Remember, that book and your writing is going to open doors that you haven't even thought of yet, and I can't wait to help you make it the absolute best. If you're feeling called to write that book, keep going, and I'm going to be right here cheering you on. See you again next week.